You're listening to Washington Watch. I'm Tony Perkins, your host. So glad to have you with us. The website, tonyperkins.com. All right, as I mentioned yesterday, while, we're looking at this contested election, and, we had Reince Priebus on earlier talking about what's happening in Wisconsin. He said he thinks there's enough there to overturn the results there. Others are claiming it could happen elsewhere. But that aside, I think we still have to keep an eye looking straight forward as to what might be ahead with a potential Harris-Biden administration. And for any American who cares about religious freedom, they need to be paying close attention to the Human Rights Campaign's Blueprint for Positive Change 2020. In my view, this is one of the boldest assaults on religious freedom that I've seen. Joining me now to talk more about this, Dr. Al Mohler. He is the president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. Dr. Mohler, welcome to the program.
Tony, as always, it's good to be with you. These are critical days.
They are. And by the way, congratulations. Today you were elected president of the Evangelical Theological Society. Congratulations, my friend.
Thank you. I hope to serve well. There are few things more important in our view than keeping evangelical theology evangelical.
Well, quite frankly, if you get the theology right, most of the other things fall in place. If we are anchored to the truth, we're going to end up in the right place. But let's talk about the Human Rights Campaign. In fact, I've got a clip I want to play to set the stage for this, because this is not, some group out there that is advocating for some radical policy that does not have the ear of Joe Biden. Joe Biden has been in front of this group, the Human Rights Campaign, on many occasions, and as you'll hear, he sees them as an ally and us as the enemy. Bobby, play that clip.
Despite losing in the courts and in the court of public opinion, these forces of intolerance remain determined to undermine and roll back the progress you all have made. This time, they, not you, have an ally in the White House. This time, they have an ally. They're a small percentage of the American people, virulent people, some of them the dregs of society. And instead of using the full might of the executive branch to secure justice, dignity, safety for all, the president uses the White House as a literal bully pulpit, callously exerting his power over those who have little or none.
Again, that was Joe Biden speaking at the gala of the Human Rights Campaign. Dr. Mohler, sounds like they're pretty close.
Yeah, you have an administration that if there is a Biden administration, it will be, by Joe Biden's own pledge, the most LGBTQ positive administration in American history. And, at the very least, we know what their game plan is. But I'm astounded, Tony, at how clear and candid they are. I think it's like discovering the German battle plans for the invasion of France. We've been told exactly what they intend in terms of stripping Christian schools of accreditation. It's a fundamental assault upon religious liberty. And the Human Rights Campaign is the organization behind this plan.
And the media is talking all about this, right?
Not a peep. In fact, I had no idea of this until I went deeply into the document myself and found that paragraph. And it was like reading the invasion plan before the invasion.
Well, let's talk about it. And now it does a multitude of things, because this is their kind of wish list, and it basically counters everything that the Trump administration has done to protect religious freedom, both here and abroad. But one of the things in just talking about you being elected to the Evangelical Theological Society, the importance of religious education and being true to Scripture, this is a direct assault on the ability of institutions of higher learning to do so from a religious perspective. And explain why.
Yeah, Tony, it's insidious because it kind of reflects the fact that there is a recognition that at least Christian colleges, it's religion, as you know, in general, that will be covered here, but the vast majority are Christian colleges, seminaries, Christian schools, including K through 12. There's at least the recognition here that our schools would have a real constitutional case to make on religious liberty grounds if they tried to just shut us down from operating. So what's insidious here is this is a go around. This is what I haven't seen in black and white print ever before, and it is that they want to coerce the Biden administration to use the power of executive orders through the Department of Education to deny any school that stands against the LGBTQ revolution. And by the way, and very insidiously, the language they use, to strip our schools of accreditation. And again, there are Christians who would say, well, no big deal. But they don't understand that accreditation has everything to do with whether your school can accept students from the GI Bill, whether or not your school can participate in federal student aid programs. My school does not, by the way, but hundreds of Christian schools do. And whether or not your degrees and credits will be recognized to transfer to another institution, or your graduates able to apply to a graduate program elsewhere.
All right.
It's a direct assault.
I mean, this is further trying to isolate and marginalize Christian religious institutions, because, as you said, this will put them outside the realm of being able to communicate and work with. For instance, I had my undergraduate degree from Liberty University. Under this, if they're successful, Liberty would lose its accreditation. And when I did my master's work at Louisiana State University, they would not recognize my undergraduate work.
No, absolutely. And they know exactly how accreditation works. And that's what's so sly. And then they say two grounds. Very interesting, Tony, because this tells us what worldview conflict we're facing. The first was, to deny the ability to deny accreditation to any religious school that discriminates. Now, again, that means for Christian colleges, housing, admissions, hiring of faculty, and student life. In other words, you'd have to recognize same-sex marriage. You'd have to recognize homosexuality as a legitimate lifestyle for students. You'd have to hire without regard to a Christian understanding of sexuality. And of course, the T in transgender means also on gender. But then they add any school that does not accept modern science. And that's an insidious term these days anyway. But what they mean by that is, especially when it comes to, sexual identity and gender identity, that means that if we don't accept frankly, the rebellion against the created order that's demanded of the LGBTQ activists, then we'll be stripped of accreditation. The further you look at this document, the more you realize it really is diabolical.
When I saw that, Dr. Mohler, I said, when we don't accept the science, and I'm thinking, who is it that's not accepting the science, the biological reality that there are two sexes, male and female? They're the ones denying it. But what they've done is they've bullied and strong-armed all of these medical societies and all of these the psychological associations to embrace what they're pushing, so that they've normalized what has long been seen as abnormal.
Yeah, and so you've got doctors on the one hand over here acting like they completely buy into this nonsense of the modern transgender revolutionaries. But Tony, they haven't found a way around the fact you need a sperm and an egg to get a baby. In other words, they have to say on the one hand this and contradict it on the other hand. You cannot join this revolution against the creation order and still produce babies, for example.
Right. So, Dr. Mohler, you said this is like finding the Germans' war plans. And I agree with you. I think, look, and this is the problem. Number one, people aren't paying attention. I think there's a lot of people focused on the election contest, and so they're not looking to see what Biden is proposing, who he's putting into his cabinet. But secondly, there's this idea, they're not going to do that. They won't do it. I'm here to tell you, they will. I think we need to start believing what we see. And so with that in mind, what is the posture that the church should be in when we look at what is ahead under what might be a Harris-Biden administration?
Tony, by the way, this just points to the fact that President Trump did exactly do what he said he would do in executive orders. And frankly, the left was shocked by it, which is the reason why I think you have these leftist organizations putting out these lists right now, because they're basically saying to Joe Biden, we're expecting the very same thing from you. And so it's attributed to the fact that President Trump followed through on his promises that there are executive orders in place that the left opposes. But you asked the right question. What do we do now? Well, number one, knowledge is power. We got to know what's going on. I mean, if the enemy does have a war plan against you, you have no excuse if it's handed to you not dealing with it. We need to inform Christians about this, which is why I appreciate what you're doing right now, and you do this every day. I think we've got to understand that Christians are going to have to pay a price in order to defend religious liberty, and I think American Christians have always thought this is something coming, but it's here. It's here in text. It's just been given to us.
Yeah, I think that's extremely important. This is not theoretical, and I'm here to tell you that they have closely watched what the Trump administration has done, and they're trying to counter every step that they took. For instance, they're looking at the State Department and the commission that Secretary Pompeo put together on unalienable rights, which really kind of cleared the deck and went back to the core of what is a fundamental human right, not these made up, make-believe rights that people were able to strong-arm their way through, but what is at its core, which is revolutionary, quite frankly, in going back to that foundation. They want to very quickly cover all of this up.
You got your finger right on something absolutely crucial. Secretary of State Pompeo and that Commission on Unalienable Rights did an incredibly brave thing. He actually, on behalf of the State Department, said, let's identify what are really the human rights that God's given, that our Constitution recognizes, that we want to fight for every person on the planet and every country on earth. And that clearly, revealed the fact that there are these newly invented rights that are artificial. They're merely declared by courts. They have no basis in the creation order. They have no basis in constitutional history. And look, the left is in sheer panic over this because they've had all these artificial rights they've been putting forth for years. And I appreciate Secretary of State Pompeo having the courage to say those aren't real. And by the way, this group claims an international consensus. Well, you and I both know right now that if there's an international consensus on issues of human sexuality and marriage, it's not what the Human Rights Campaign represents.
No, not at all, except with maybe a few countries in Western Europe, not many. The opposite is true. In fact, as I've met with leaders from different countries, it was like a sigh of relief from what the Trump administration was focusing on in their foreign policy, for instance, religious freedom, as opposed to abortion and this new view of human sexuality that they were forcing on many of these countries that were deeply opposed to this based on religious grounds. I mean, I think we've reached a point in our society, Dr. Mohler, and I want to ask you for your opinion on this, but my take is that we've become, it's kind of like the parable of the wheat and the tares. There's not much in between. We've got the wheat and we've got the tares. And when we see if this transition takes place, such a stark contrast and what all the good that was done, there's going to be this quick move to undo it and move the other direction. And if we have the opportunity, I think the direction would be the opposite in 4 years. It's just like this ping pong match back and forth.
Yeah, the left plays a very long game. And the left has been winning, I would argue, for the better part of the last 50 years on the cultural and moral issues. You just like where there's marijuana or same-sex marriage or whatever. And so they're working hard to try to ensure by their goals that the 4-year Trump administration was a temporary interruption and otherwise unimpeded liberal progress. The issues you were just talking about and your involvement on religious liberty around the world. I mean, you had President Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton who said they made LGBTQ issues a matter of American foreign policy. And the Biden administration's now going to, if they have the opportunity, they're going to come in and do that at warp speed. Yeah. And I think most American conservative Christians just don't have any idea how all of the things that they've celebrated for the last 4 years, they're all endangered, and many of them can be reversed in fairly short order. Which, by the way, points to the importance, at least, of holding the Senate.
Yes. I see. I think if President Trump had another 4 years, that he would be able to make deeper systemic changes that could prevent this from just being an interruption to the left's long march through our institutions.
Right. One of the things the Trump administration did well on executive orders was on several of the ones that are of interest to us, even right on these issues. they've made it so that at least it will take some doing to undo them. And that's why I'm just hoping. So even even if this is just a practical matter, even if we do have to face a Biden administration, if we have a Republican majority in the Senate, that can at least stop some confirmations to Senate confirmed positions, like in the Department of Education, that could at least slow this down. And sometimes for conservatives, if we can't stop it for now, we can at least slow it down.
And that is their game plan, to force them to nominate moderates and not left-wing radicals to those posts. Dr. Al Mohler, we're out of time, but I want to thank you for joining us. As always, great to have a conversation with you. And again, congratulations on your election today.
Thank you, Tony. It's always good to be with you. We'll be in the fight together.
Absolutely. Arm in arm. Folks, thank you for joining us as well, and I hope you will be in the fight for these fundamental freedoms that define America and have secured this country for 244 years.